Hi, welcome to Wowza Studio Sessions, live from NAB. This session's about troubleshooting your live stream in the first mile. My name is Anthony Lazaro. I'm the product manager at Wowza. I'm joined with two other people, Eric Zawalko from Facebook, Charlie Good from Wowza. Eric, Charlie, why don't you give a quick intro of yourselves?
Charlie, you want to go first?
Sure, I'll go first. So I'm Charlie Good, CTO, co-founder of Wowza Media Systems. Go ahead.
I'm Eric Zawalko. I'm a video engineer at Facebook, and I work on our live stuff, Facebook Live.
Cool, so we're going to talk about troubleshooting the first mile. Eric, you do a ton with that with Facebook.
It's true.
My role at Wowza, I'm with the Clearcaster product team, and we've built out a ton of kind of health monitoring, reliability metrics. So we're going to get into the nitty gritty here in this session. Probably bring up some horror stories that we've run through.
There's so many good horror stories. Anyone who's ever streamed.
But maybe first, let's just go into both of our product sets. On the Facebook Live side, I'd love to hear, what are you guys doing to monitor kind of that video contribution feed coming to you and then through the system?
That is a great question. We have a couple of internal tools that we use to troubleshoot and monitor high-profile live streams. We've also recently come out with a broadcaster view. So if you go and you create your live stream in Facebook, you can see what we're receiving from you, what the bit rates are, and you can kind of monitor it, make sure that stuff stays healthy. And then we also have these little warnings that pop up if you have bad video settings, if your GOP is set wrong, or you're sending us too many B frames, or if we're losing connection, if you're dropping, if we're not getting as much video from you as we should be, there is warnings about all that stuff. You wouldn't have to worry about that if you were using a Clearcaster, though, because all those settings would be taken care of for you, and it would dynamically adjust its bit rate for network conditions.
Yeah, so we do referencing our adaptive network encoding. So on the Clearcaster side, let's jump over to that. We do a ton of stuff when it comes to monitoring your video from the SDI through ingest. Charlie, why don't you talk a little bit about kind of what we have from a capability-wise of what we monitor when we're looking at stuff?
Sure, you could look at it three ways, right? We're doing kind of three things. One is we use the Live Encoder API to get all of our proper encoding settings based on what our input stream looks like. So if we're 1080p 60 going to Facebook, we send that information in through the Live Encoder API, and it tells us how to encode. Based on what kind of event we're doing, based on what page we're hitting, we're going to get back the proper encoding settings for that event. So that's kind of being proactive about what we're going to do with that stream. Once an event starts, then as Eric said, we carefully monitor the TCP connection to try to make sure we're adjusting on the fly what's happening during that event, throttling up and down the bit rate to make sure we produce a stream that's low latency and is not buffering and is the highest quality we can produce for the given network conditions. Yeah. So we'll throttle down if we see, and we'll also try to throttle back up if the network conditions get better.
Yeah, one good example of this, of just measuring that TCP connection for network congestion, I was working with someone, and this is probably a common story, I was working with someone last week who was running an event, saw that we were throttling bitrate, was wondering what was going on, and they said, well, when I run my speed test, everything looks fine. So what do you mean I'm not having a good network?
Yeah.
So speed test isn't necessarily testing that network path to your ingest point.
No, and also not necessarily testing the throughput of the network. When you're pushing 10 megabits per second through a network, it's a lot different than a speed test.
Yep.
Which is not sending video over the internet, which
and
is much harder.
One thing that we worked collaboratively on Wowza and Facebook recently was that DNS path selection.
Oh yeah, that's really cool. It's out now.
Yeah, so that's out now, where we actually test into 3 different ingest points.
Yeah. It's actually 9. We test 9 different ingest. I know. I was going to correct you, but it's actually 9.
So this came out of our network is really weird. And we started having these issues where, because we're natted, our DNS would think we were in Paris and we were actually streaming from Menlo Park. And so we would have these streams, and the Clearcaster would drop the bit rate super low, and we'd be like, we're on the Facebook network. How is this going so badly? And then we looked at what pop we were being ingested at, and it was halfway around the world. And so we were like, oh, we should probably figure out how to do a better job of selecting what pop gets targeted when you go live. And so now, yeah, you run a connection test with 9 different pops. Each test is like a 2 megabit test.
Like 2 megabytes of data flows
Megabytes.
over that test. Yep.
And then we decide which one's most performant out of all of those, and that's the one you stream to. And then I think if you're using redundancy, it will make sure to target a different pop with the backup one. If not, we should do that.
Yeah.
I'm not sure
So
if we
the,
do or no.
yeah.
It's a good idea, though.
Yeah.
RTMP does not work great over long distances.
No, it does not.
Lesson learned for our for your DNS mapping
Yeah.
there. The
TCP kind of.
I mean, the other thing, too, with that is that if you're running a 2-hour event, the network conditions might be good when you start, but they're not necessarily going to stay that way.
Yep.
And that's why we're constantly monitoring and adjusting, like literally every half a second to make sure that we know what's going on with that connection during the event, because it's going to change. You're going to have issues.
one, maybe changing modes a little bit. I'd love to hear. I have a few examples. I don't know if you do, but hopefully you do.
I'm sure.
I'd love to hear about examples of how health monitoring or just being very smart about your monitoring has solved issues for customers they should have known about themselves. So one good example that I'll give you is I have a very large broadcaster who is about to go live for a pregame show of one of the biggest sporting events of the year, and I got a frantic phone call saying, "The video's black. What's going on?" And so I go into our monitoring dashboard and I pull it up and I say, "Well, you don't have a video source connected to the encoder." And so then, the person I'm working with calls down to their operations, person in the apparatus room, and sure enough, they unplug the SDI feed.
Before you went live.
into the video encoder.
Good idea, right?
So,
Yeah. Oh man.
kind of funny how I could be thousands of miles away, but I know more about what's going on than the people that are right there in the building.
We had an event that we were doing once, and this is not about monitoring, but it's a similar story of just like all the things that go wrong as soon as you try to do a live stream, which is probably going to cause problems for this live stream right now because that's how live streaming always works. But we were doing an event in Lagos, Nigeria. It was in like this big bunker, with 2.5 foot thick cement walls. So we had like no cell reception inside. None of the comm systems for any of the production team were working, and it was a local production crew who had never done an event like this before. And so we get it all set up, we get it tested, and everything's working. And all of a sudden, we're like minutes from going live, and everything goes black. And we're like, "What's going on? What's going on?" And one of the production guys had just decided to start repatching all the cables 3 minutes before we went live. And it was crazy. Who does that? Don't change anything.
Not a good
It's
idea.
all set up.
One of the other
Recover from that?
We did. We went live, and it worked really well. It was like a really nice live stream. Yeah.
One of the other topics of monitoring that I really like about how we monitor our appliance is we look at audio levels from what's coming into us, so we can see if there is good audio coming in.
Yeah.
But then we also track audio sync through our appliance, so we can understand if audio sync is.
How do you track the sync?
So when the video hits the capture card coming into the encoder,
Yeah.
it's timestamped. And then when it's going through the encoding process, it's timestamped in and out. And then when it's going to the transport, it's also timestamped. So you can see if during its movement through our appliance, if the video and audio timestamps
That's really cool.
increased in delta. And if that did occur, then something is,
Yeah, you
you're
have to
choosing
set
to do
off
something
a
that's
lot
too
of-
much.
yeah.
Or something's going on there. So that's a great fun one to track because audio sync is so
Tricky.
just tricky to
It's
debug
weird.
too. It's happening, where is it happening? And so it's really great to be it's not happening here. and you
Yeah.
can make a decision there.
It's part of troubleshooting is knowing where the problems
Yeah.
are.
But the other one that's probably more back to a funny scenario is just the audio levels. And so we provide on the encoder these bouncing audio bars.
I'm seeing them right now.
And we provide bouncing audio bars, and the amount of broadcasts that go live without audio because you're worried about hot mics is just, I just find it funny. It's such a big part of broadcast. It's wait, you
need
forgot
audio.
to mic them.
You might want to turn on that mic.
Yeah.
The other thing we are working on, and we haven't quite finished yet, is like packet level tracing, so that we can trace a packet through the system from capture through the encoder, through to the infrastructure, all the way through the Facebook infrastructure.
And all the way to delivery.
Yeah, all the way, yeah, it's
Someday.
true, all the way to delivery.
Yeah,
and
which
so it's a
it's gonna be
cool
really
tool.
cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not built yet, but it's
Some of it's built, but not all of it.
built, and we're working on putting all the pieces together. But being able to, like, for any given broadcast, look and watch the segments, or I guess it's packets, or it's frames right now.
Frames,
It's
really,
actually
right.
frames, because for RTMP it has to be frames. But watching the frames go, like, get created inside the Clearcaster, and then watch as they hit, like, each level of our infrastructure, and then watch them get sent out to the players. And then you can get a lot of information about that. Like, if you start seeing, like, huge latency increases over that time, you know something's wrong. Maybe, like, your encoding host is having issues, or you're sending the wrong. You couldn't do this with a Clearcaster, but maybe you're sending the wrong settings, like your bit rate's too high, or your whatever, or you're dropping a lot of frames, and so we're waiting to get those frames before we, like, play out, and so your streaming rate drops really low because we're not getting video in fast enough to put it out in real time.
Yep. One of the other metrics that I like to just double check in case there's ever an issue with the stream is just, it's simple, but just like the connection attempts.
Yeah.
Like, did you have a closed session
Yeah,
in your
did you
RTMP
reconnect?
connection?
Right.
And that's
yeah.
that's one of the cool things we actually now have in the Facebook UI that you can see. There's an event log, and it'll show you every single time you have a disconnect. And that's really powerful.
Yeah.
But also you can do it with the Clear.
And I know you all just opened up some monitoring tools too in that, producer
Yeah.
view. And one thing that's cool is you can look at our monitoring side in our UI and even locally off the encoder, and then you
Yeah.
can look at it in your UI as well, and you kind of get this clean view.
See if both things are reporting the same, and verify your hypotheses.
The other thing that's helped us a ton is we've learned from just the high volume events across the planet with what we've done in the last year and a half. Like, just so many events have run through the Clearcaster and the
Yep.
Facebook infrastructure that you just learn so much by analyzing the data, troubleshooting problems, that has led to enhancements on both sides as
Yeah.
to how we deal with live stream.
Yeah, it's really cool.
So let's circle, close this out a little bit. Go around, Charlie. I'll start with you. But like, what's the one metric? If you're going to do some health monitoring of your stream, and you have the world to look at, like, what is the one thing as it relates to that kind of first mile? So encoding through ingest. What's the metric that you really want to focus in
My
on?
super geeky answer is round trip time and congestion window. Like, if you really are monitoring the TCP connection at the lowest level, that's how you're going to know whether you're getting any sort of throughput that matches your, your desired throughput for the given
And that's
stream.
pretty low level.
My geeky answer being CTO.
You probably can't get a lot of products that show you that. You can get the Clearcaster, which tracks it, but that's probably why it's in the Clearcaster, is because you built it. What about you, Eric?
Yeah, so I think, and the hardest thing in first mile, other than operator error when setting up your stream, which would be like mishandling the settings and stuff, which, once again, if you have a Clearcaster, you don't have to worry about. But other than that is network issues, especially because you'll be at an event like NAB where you have no control over the network, and there's 130,000 people on it, and they all showed up after you did all your testing, so you couldn't test with the network under congestion. So we actually have a metric somewhere that we sort of track, and we call it video streaming rate, and it is just a measure of, like, are we getting do we have a 1-to-1 ratio of frames in to frames out? Right. And if that drops below 1, you're not getting frames fast enough to put them out in real time, and you're gonna start showing buffering events universally to all players, which is like the most catastrophic thing that can happen in a stream. I guess other than it just not going live.
Yeah. So both of those are pretty geeky numbers, I'd say. I'll try to go something a little more accessible. So we give you a metric called available bandwidth on the Clearcaster.
Yeah.
So we set a target bandwidth based on where you're trying to publish to, and then based on your kind of what's going on in the network, we reset that target to your available bandwidth, and then we encode to that available bandwidth. So this is that adaptive network encoding.
That's really cool.
But that metric of available bandwidth is a great gut check of, like, is there something going wrong between my environment through the first mile it doesn't tell you exactly what's wrong. You'd have to dig into Charlie's numbers to dig into why that's occurring. But it's a great gut check for someone's producing. They can kind of glance over and be like, yeah, my available bandwidth is good. So I think
that's a good one.
I think that's a wrap. So if you're looking for metrics to track, find something pretty advanced to do, round trip time or network congestion on your TCP connection, or build out entire infrastructure and measure video frames in and out, or maybe just do what I suggested and find an appliance that gives you available bandwidth. But those are 3 things that you can do to troubleshoot your live encoding workflow. Thanks for joining Wowza and Facebook live from NAB.
Bye,
y'all.
Thank you.
Bye.